In 1174, Amalric, the king of Jerusalem, passed away. Shortly thereafter, his son was crowned as the new king of Jerusalem, this youngster being named Baldwin IV. He was only 13 years old at the time, and by the time he was 15, he achieved full rule. He was educated by a fella named William of Tyre, who could practically be seen as one of the brightest minds of the era, at least in comparison to what else was around. Baldwin showed great promise as a king. He had a sharp mind, had one of the best teachers available. He was a great leader, was very charismatic, was very brave as well, as proven later on, and he'd probably go far. Unfortunately, a few years prior to being crowned king, William noticed that Baldwin seemed to have an abnormal threshold for pain. Upon examining him closely, he realized that Baldwin was showing the early signs of leprosy. Baldwin took the crown at a relatively young age, but his illness would undoubtedly do him in within 10 years or so at the absolute best. And with this in mind, the public, his vassals and nobles began eyeballing his older sister. He had a younger half-sister, but she wasn't even 5 years old by this point. Now, the reasoning why is because he'd be gone in a few years, and being married to the eldest, that would make that fella next in line to the throne as a king, provided that Baldwin himself approved of the marriage. And hoping to secure an heir upon his death, in 1176, the eldest sister, Sibylla, was wed to William of Montferrat. Now, the William we saw in-game was actually William V. He was also known as William the Old, who lived until 1191 to a ripe old age of 76. He looked pretty good for 76, don't you think? Now, this William that we're talking about right here is actually William VI, although he's not usually referred to that. He also had a alias or a moniker of William the Longsword. Multiple entendres, I guess. Now, William VI was actually the fifth's eldest son. He was also Conrad of Montferrat's older brother. Unfortunately, he died in 1177 of malaria. Fortunately, though, Sibylla was pregnant by this point. In the same year, she gave birth to a young boy named Baldwin V, after, of course, his uncle. Now, Baldwin V would be heir to the throne, provided that Sibylla did not marry, or remarry rather. Let's stick to 1177 for a spell here. It was a pretty darn busy year in this region. The now 16-year-old Baldwin was aware of the growing Saracen forces, and he wanted to strike first. To make things even more difficult, the vassals beneath Baldwin were too occupied with trying to win him over so they could remarry the recently widowed Sibylla. Everything always seemed to come around to who would replace him, and whoever brought it up would always be sort of like, well, you know, I'm single, hey, how about that? And it just kept on coming, and even if a real dud was to replace him in death, if he could handle Saladin, then things could potentially be not as disastrous. Probably something that he had in mind. At least I like to think that. Anyhow, planning ahead, he sent diplomats to the Byzantine Empire, hoping to attain an alliance, through which he would strike Egypt along with the Byzantines and crush the head of the snake. Now, right when this was starting to develop, however, Saladin happened to begin a large-scale offensive of his own into the Levant. Now, it's important to remember here that Saladin, as a tactician and commander, is darn near a thing of legend nowadays. There are repeated points in this era where he made the opposition look like a complete joke in comparison, and this wasn't always due to how incompetent they were, but it was more so just to show how skilled he was. Now, upon steamrolling across Crusader territory, he directed his forces toward Gaza. The Crusaders saw this, and they rallied their forces there in preparation. They readied themselves and waited, and waited, and waited for a force that never came. The Crusaders unfortunately fell for a very convincing feint, giving Saladin an easy, clear route to capture the heavily fortified Ascalon. Baldwin, who was inside of the fortress Ascalon, braced for a siege. Unfortunately, it was another feint. Leaving a smaller army to encircle and besiege Ascalon, the bulk of the Saracen forces steered towards Jerusalem, the ultimate goal. Left with only 500 knights, a few thousand foot soldiers, and a fortress that was only serving as a jail cell at this point, Baldwin knew he had to take the offensive immediately. Now, bear in mind that by this stage of his leprosy, even walking was becoming incredibly difficult for him. Whenever he was on the battlefield, he would also be completely wrapped in bandages. This also, of course, earned him the name of the Leper King. Seeing no alternative, he led a charge with all of his men, blitzing straight out of Ascalon and breaking past the enemy's siege that was left behind. Moving with a considerably smaller force, he made a speedy beeline for the rear of Saladin's army, which was creeping towards Jerusalem, snagging up the unprotected settlements as it did so. Finally, just under 50 miles from Jerusalem, he caught up to Saladin's forces. This was the start of the Battle of Montgisard. The troop count for the Crusader forces is a little hazy. Firstly, you have the 500 knights that are with him. That's confirmed. As far as infantry, everything I have seen says a couple or a few thousand. And I'm inclined to think maybe 3,000 to 4,000. Now, his forces were making a rush straight toward the unaware backside of Saladin's massive army of 27,000 Saracens. By this point, however, Saladin's troops were, I guess you could say, in their third victory lap, so to speak. I mean, they were exhausted. This fatigue hamstringed his usual utilization of cavalrymen and skirmishers, so his hands were tied offensively. The only thing he could do was form forces upon a hill and hold the defensive line. Additionally, this sort of an attack completely blindsided and confused the Saracens. The army was completely out of formation and in a complete panic. Morale was going crazy, and Saladin figured that Baldwin would have stayed put in Ascalon, seeing the size of the force he was up against. But it seems that for once his prediction had fallen flat. Now, imagine you're on the smaller Crusader force. You're completely outnumbered by a ridiculous margin. The enemy forces are not too far away at this point from Jerusalem, the heart of the kingdom. And Saladin's tactics offensively outmaneuvered and overpowered anything the Crusaders could muster in opposition. This was a Hail Mary to look at it from any other angle. The average guy on the Crusader line was probably thinking they would end up dying on that field. However, instead of sitting back, crippled by his disease, which would have been pretty understandable by this point, the king was on the front line of the formation, which, according to writings, was deathly silent. Contrast to that, the Saracens were making all sorts of racket you can imagine because of the panic they were in. Baldwin called for the Bishop of Bethlehem to bring forth a particular relic which was said to be a piece of the cross upon which Christ was crucified, the true cross. He kneeled before it, offered a prayer, and rose up to what was described as a deafening cheer from his troops. Now, although it might be hard for us to imagine To the average crusader, this scene, this display, just set off what you could call an explosion of morale. I mean, the troops were riled up, and they were ready to kick ass and take names. With that, of course, Baldwin actually led the charge into the Saracen formation, personally, and they caused a swath of absolute devastation through the now scattered army of Saladin. As the forces tried to disperse, they were met with a frenzied bottleneck. The region of this battle was inside of a narrow ravine, and it gave the panicked Saracens nowhere to run to aside from into each other or straight towards a charging small force of crusaders. Now, the end result left about 1,000 crusaders dead, but losses for the Saracens, 90%. Of the 27,000 troops, 3,000 made it back home to Egypt. Saladin lost all of his coffers, loot, and luggage he had with him, in addition to one of his nephews. Some accounts say that he barely escaped with his life, and all of his personal bodyguards had fallen in battle protecting him. It was a terrible backbreaker for Saladin, and a victory that changed Baldwin from being known as the Leper King, who was a young, doomed leader, and into the hero of Jerusalem. And Saladin wasn't about to let that defeat keep him pinned, however. He was back on the offensive in 1179, in a smaller skirmish known as the Battle of Jacob's Ford. He won, and following this victory, the two rulers sat down and agreed to a truce, one that'd be short-lived. Okay, now we got that out of the way, we're back inside the game. Let's grab a random flag, for no apparent reason. And I wanted to this was me just screwing around. I didn't exactly get a good look at this previously, but you'll remember at the beginning of the game, we went inside the tower to the left. And from over here, Saladin was having his lecture against Robert before we sprung the trap on him. Said trap being that over there. And that's where the logs came out, and etc., etc. Never really came up here before, so I figured what the hell. And unfortunately you can't jump off. I was hoping to jump to my death, but it wouldn't let me. Oh well. And once again, Jerusalem, for one last time. How are y'all doing? I'm doing pretty good. It's a Friday as I record this, so I am fantastic. These guys, well, they ain't doing so hot. Now let's try something special. Pardon me. Yep. Knocked a couple guards over, but they don't mind. I guess those guys were jerks or something. And that is the horse blitz I tried to pull off earlier in the game, but I had no luck with. Let's just skip ahead and check on our good buddy one last time over here. Let's see how Grumpy Gus treats us this time.
Safety and peace, Altair.
Upon you as well, brother.
Seems fate has a funny way with things.
So it's true then. Roberto de Sablé is in Jerusalem.
I've seen the knights myself.
Only misfortune follows that man. If he's here, it's because he intends ill. I won't give him the chance to act.
Do not let vengeance cloud your thoughts, brother. We both know no good can come of that.
I have not forgotten. You have nothing to fear. I do not seek revenge, but knowledge.
Truly you are not the man I once knew.
My work has taught me many things, revealed secrets to me. But there are still pieces of this puzzle I do not possess.
What do you mean?
All the men I've laid to rest have worked together, united by this man. Robert has designs upon the land. This much I know for certain. But how and why, when and where, these things remain out of reach.
Crusaders and Saracens working together?
They are none of these things, but something else. Templars.
The Templars are a part of the Crusader army.
Or so they'd like King Richard to believe. No, their only allegiance is to Roberto de Sablé and some mad idea that they will stop the war.
You spin a strange tale.
You have no idea, Malik. But tell me where they've been seen. I should be after him before he slips away.
3 places I can say for certain. West of here, near both a guard tower and a hospital. And to the southwest, at the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. See what you can learn. I will do the same.
I'll be quick as I can.
Stay safe, my friend.
I think the length of the game kind of messed this up a little bit. Remember last time, he still wasn't warming up to us, and now that we've come in here, he's buddy-buddy. Which, I don't know, I guess I needed some sort of conflict resolution because it was the end of the game. I always thought it just felt kind of forced, the friendliness. But whatever. So, let's just head on to the west and look us up a viewpoint. We'll snoop around for a high-up structure. Now, in this episode, we'll be coming across 2 real-world structures. However, this part of Jerusalem is where things get kind of hazy. From looking at the in-game map versus maps that were real of the old city from this era, it seems like the westernmost regions are a lot more trim and shrunken down in-game than they should be. Whoops. Where the hell is that guy who sees me? Whatever. For example, the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, it's found among the far western wall in-game, and the Tower of David is due south from it. We'll be seeing those near the end of the video. And if we place these structures in the real, based off where they were in the real world, I think the Church of the Holy Sepulchre would be about where we are right now, actually. It looks like it's pretty close to the district divide that we just passed over. And the Tower of David's to its far southwest. In the real world, it's right beside the Jaffa Gate. Now, let's move away from the whole inaccuracies, get to the nitty-gritty history on the matter. The Church of the Holy Sepulchre was built on the claimed location of the Hill of Calvary. And essentially, the claim was that was in the 1st century, when this region was still outside the walls of Old Jerusalem, Christ was crucified on the site, hence its namesake of the Holy Sepulchre. Let's hop on down here. Whoop. Now, what's a sepulchre, you might be wondering? You might be wondering where we're heading next, too. Let's just head over there. Well, in the Poor District installment, early on, I mentioned tombs that were carved into rock faces. Those are sepulchres.
Please, just a few coins, please.
Now, there's also a bit of a tie-in that explains some things, and as I was saying, there is fuck it.
Safety and peace, Master. Have you seen all the vile Templars in town? I have been ordered to kill as many as I can before the burial of your latest victim, Montgisard. I am sure if it were your mission, it would be done in no time. I have learned much while looking for those Templars. I will share valuable information with you when you get back.
Latest victim? Buddy, you are doing a poor job of being an informant. Ooh. Well, let's just go ahead and skitter around here. In the meantime, let's pick up where I left off. So a sepulchre is one of those... Damn it. It's one of those rock tombs. And the story goes that Christ... Okay, we'll try this. Story goes that Christ was crucified on Calvary Hill, of course, and he was entombed on site in a sepulchre. And of course... This would also mean that this is where Christ was said to have been resurrected. This is also why the biblical tale... That's another one. There we go. That's why the tale in the Bible mentions him moving a stone out of the way when he awoke, because it was the seal on the sepulchre where he was. Which way to go? Usually I just kind of played these by ear,
Somebody help me.
because these guys will patrol and move around in the meantime.
Why are you doing this?
Alright. Anyhow, back to the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. In the 2nd century, a temple of Aphrodite, or Venus if you're Roman, was built on this site. Historians claim that the Roman emperor of the time, Hadrian, built it on site. Now, you might think the odds are kind of weird that he happened to build a... There we go. You might think the odds are kind of weird that he'd build a, a Roman/Greek site of that he built a temple to someone from Greek or Roman mythology. The odds be kind of weird. Well, actually, Hadrian learned from local rumors that this was actually where Christ was crucified, and of course, Hadrian really didn't like Christians. In fact, the general consensus is that he, where is that jerk? General consensus is that he built it on site just to really piss off Christians. Now, this remained in place for a while, and then in the early 4th century, another Roman emperor, this one by the name of Constantine I, ordered for the temple on site. There we go. He ordered for the temple on site to be leveled, and a church to be built in place of it. Now, Constantine did this because he was a converted Christian. In fact, he was the first Roman emperor to do such a thing. He left his mother, Helena, to supervise the construction, during which she found a piece of crucifixion cross inside of a sepulchre, or a stone tomb. Now, a scholar who was on site claimed that there was definitive proof that this was the tomb of Christ, but wouldn't you know it, this fellow was known for being pretty dishonest and exaggerating all the time, so he's not a very reliable font of information on this front. He could very well have been cooking it up to make it sound more extravagant, and most folks seem to believe that was the case here.
Stand upon a threshold.
Where is this fella? Go away. Here we go. Right around here. Plenty of time. This'll be a snap. Whoops! Wrong weapon. Well, Mom always said, finish what you start. And of course, our informant doesn't need to know we screwed up.
I know now why I joined our clan. Just to be in your presence is a gift from God. This is what I have learned about Robert's men. They are well prepared for battle. To fight them all at once would be unwise. Better to let them chase you for a while before striking back. But it is disrespectful for me to tell a master how he should behave in combat. Forgive me, master.
Well, I'm gonna have to lecture you on your disrespect, buddy. You know what's coming. Here's your punishment. Yep, I'm about to do it again.
You know, you could have been more careful.
I could have hit you a little harder, too. Let's see if I can't rectify that.
Help me! Somebody help me!
This never gets old for me. Watching it's one thing, but uh-oh. Oh, you're not getting away.
No, please don't.
Uh-oh. Come on. Come on. Haha. Oh. Welp. So here we have the fancy Syrian sword. It allows me to one-shot some guards a little more easily. But after a little bit of a mess, we're through that, and oh.
Of those we once called friends. We have all suffered because of this. But now we are offered a chance at redemption. A chance to begin anew. Let us make peace with the Crusaders. Let us live as one. We must be strong, we must be brave, and we must find the courage to face those we once called our enemies and now instead call them friends. The Crusaders come to Jerusalem, bringing with them an opportunity to end the fighting, to stop the war. That we may stand as one, we must not turn them away.
My fists want to be friends with your face, buddy.
You die now!
You speak of peace, but your words are hollow.
No, I speak the truth. Why would you say other?
You're a Templar.
So I am?
Then you are also a liar and a fraud, just like your master. Where is he? What does he intend?
It's peace he seeks, I swear it. And the proof is in his actions. A Christian at a Muslim's funeral. We want an end to all of this.
Only because it serves your needs.
But this is a noble thing we want. The land will be united beneath our banner.
United through force. You'd enslave us all.
It is for the best.
No, it's not. And so long as my brothers and I breathe, you will not succeed.
And thanks to that fight, there was nobody around to watch this guy talk, so that made it a little easier. I guess it's about time I finally head to a viewpoint. Head up there. Back to what I was saying about the Holy Sepulchre, there's no real definitive proof that it was on site because, well, the unreliable source of information behind it. But regardless, church was built on site to honor his crucifixion and his burial. The innermost sanctum of the church, known as the edicule in Latin, or the couvocleon in Greek, was built directly above the sepulchre, which was first stripped of dirt, leaving just the rock casing, so to speak. And the edicule can be spotted by the large dome that caps the rotunda it's within. So essentially you see later on we'll be coming to the Church of the Holy Sepulchre and you'll see a dome on top, and right there is supposed to be directly over where the sepulchre is supposed to be. Now, directly to the south of the sepulchre is described as almost across the street was the site of the first hospital ever to be built by the Hospitallers, and it's interesting that it comes up right now in the video because it wasn't planned, but this is a hospital right here, and even though its placement doesn't match up, it is definitely different from the past 3 or so hospitals we've seen. It's much bigger and what have you, and it looks nicer too. Now, the hospital I'm mentioning, once again, it was across the street, just south of the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, and it was established by the Hospitallers in the 12th century. And bear in mind, these hospitals at times were large complexes with high inner walls, inner buildings, and what have you. And upon losing Jerusalem to the Saracens in 1187, most of the hospital was converted into the Mosque of Omar. 30 years later, what used to be the innermost church was changed into an insane asylum, of all things. And Oop. Nice throw. But in spite of the architecture being described as just phenomenal and above anything most folks had seen, the complex was neglected and fell into disrepair and was eventually abandoned. By the early 19th century, the region was actually gifted to the Prince of Prussia when he visited. Excavations were performed on the original site, although the Church of Omar supposedly still remained, and today the hospital's original site is the location of a huge market area just to the south of the Holy Sepulchre. It's known as the Muristan, which is borrowed from the Persian word for hospital, Baimaristan. I think I'm just trying to play a bit of a Spanish pronunciation accent on that, so my condolences. And I have no idea why I still collect these. Oop. Crazy people. Okay, gotta pickpocket this fella, but getting the sweet spot is a little weird with these guys. Also, manned men at both entrances. So, I guarantee you they're going to be heading outside.
Take the map I've given you and see that the guards are placed accordingly. We'll be safe enough during the procession. It's the burial that worries me. Easy for our enemies to hide amongst the crowd.
If you're so concerned, why not post your own men? Search the site yourselves.
Our presence here has caused enough chaos. I can only imagine how the people would react, seeing Crusader soldiers marching across their holy ground.
Then perhaps you should not attend at all.
He was our friend and brother, and we will honor him as he passes from this world. You insult me by suggesting otherwise.
I'll post the men. I don't want trouble either.
Then stop trying to make it, and do as you've been asked.
Snippy, snippy. Okay. Guards at both sides. Insane people in the middle. I'm thinking he's going to take a stroll outside, and it looks... Yep, that's the case. But thankfully, the only people who can see us here are batshit insane, so I can climb right up. I can climb right up here with no real consequence or fear of getting spotted. Just gotta get to close to where he is on the street and do a little bit of pickpocketing, sorry. Like I said, this hospital stands out. I think it's probably me just grasping at straws. But I'd like to think that it's actually the hospital built by the Hospitallers, even though there are Templars here instead.
Please, can't you spare something?
No, I can't. Go away. I'll throw you later. Move it.
Have any money?
You might have noticed a couple stutters in the video on occasion. Once again, as I mentioned previously, that's just my system getting weird for some reason. It really did not like Jerusalem, and it started having a few hiccups. But it's just a random thing that comes up once in a while. Nope, there was one of them. There we go. Well, that's handled. Let's make ourselves scarce. And let's just keep on going along through these viewpoints here.
I beg of you.
West sounds good.
Please. No, you don't understand. I have nothing.
Oh my god. Ugh. And there it was again. Okay, let's see here. So we've also got a couple other things to discuss, one of which is the Tower of David, the other is the real Roberto de Sablé. We'll get to those in a few more moments.
Help! I need help! Please, anyone!
I don't know why I sat down a moment there.
Don't hurt me, please!
Once again, some of the climbing is finicky. Actually, later in the video, you're going to see a bit of a transition I had to cut out because the wall wouldn't let me climb something that should have been very possible. Huh? What? Oh! Oh, come on. And of course, whenever you get caught at this point of the game, things get very, very nasty. So let's skip past that to... Whoops. There he is. There we go. Fixed his wagon. And that's the last one. I saved y'all the experience of watching his knee get snapped. And a bit of a tower to climb, it seems. Get rid of some prying eyes. And we have the tower all to ourselves now. Of course, the scaffolding is the best way to do it here. Whoops. Yeah, way to screw up, man. There we go. So, the Tower of David, while we're on a tower, or on the topic of towers, rather. Tower of David was built a little over 2,000 years ago, in a sense. An attempt to give the old city a bit of a defensive structure near its southwestern gate. So the Tower of David earned its name because the Christian Byzantines claimed at one point that King David's ruins of his palace were on site, but I'll come back to that later. Regardless, what we see today is built on a westward expansion from the old city that kicked off in the 2nd century. I'll pick up there in a moment. Gotta stalk these fellas. Or listen, rather.
Or I'll make you.
Move it.
Did you see them?
No, but I've heard the whispers. Is it true? Crusader knights in Jerusalem?
It is.
And?
Different from the others. Finely dressed and bearing expensive gifts.
We should relieve them of this burden.
They've made camp near David's citadel, close to the cemetery.
To attend a funeral?
So it seems.
Then let us visit their camp while they pay their respects.
Anyhow, as I was saying before, there was a westward expansion of Old Jerusalem right around the 2nd century BC, and the later end result would be referred to as the First Wall, which is basically what we see to the far west, although, as I mentioned, it would in reality it was actually further west than what we see here, at least from what I can surmise. But it was called the First Wall due to the pretty remarkable structures that were constructed near and around it. It stands today. With the Jaffa Gate, it's not time for hay. Get out. We gotta handle that guy. Come on. Thank you.
It's forbidden for you. You are not supposed to be here. Leave.
Whoop. Time to hide again. Anyhow, the wall that the Tower of David's part of saw a lot of renovations over the years. Huh. He screamed as I killed him. How about that? Well, in the latter third of the 1st century BC, King Herod built 3 large towers along this first wall. It was for defensive purposes. The location of these towers mark the present day and in-game location of the Tower of David. Of the 3 towers we'll be seeing, though, only one still stands today. Now, as I mentioned, the tower is still around today, but it had a pretty interesting time over the years. It got hit hard in the 70 AD when the Romans invaded, but it was used as a barracks afterwards. By the 4th century, Christianity overtook the Romans, and monks occupied it by this point. When the Arabs took the city in 7th century, they cleaned it up in general and made it look nice and pretty. In 1099, it barely lasted through an offensive from the good old Crusaders. When the Mamluks overtook the region in 1260, they completely destroyed the tower. But those rascals, they had a change of heart and they rebuilt it. Around 1540, the Ottomans destroyed it. And then they rebuilt it. Seeing a trend here? I need some knives. Thank you. But also... Also around this point, the namesake of the Tower of David was applied to it. From what I gathered, the name itself wasn't called the Tower of David until, as I mentioned, after the Ottomans had rebuilt it. And that comes from King David, who was the same David from the whole David and Goliath story. And he's also the fella who founded Jerusalem, more importantly. We'll be seeing that at the very, very end of the video. And it seems our viewpoint is one of these fun little chapels I always have so much trouble with. And there are a lot of people watching it. Let's handle this guy first. Ooh. What happened there? Couldn't make up his mind, I guess. At this point right here, I want to try and take out that guy up there with a throwing knife. But it's kind of between the lock-on in the game and some other factors, it's kind of hard to gauge how you can reach those guys with throwing knives.
No, please don't leave.
But as it stands, I took out that one guy, and there are a couple patrols, but yeah, it looks like this side is blind to the guards. There we go. Red blinking is gone, and it's climbing time.
There's something. I'm poor and
So, in the meantime, let's talk about Roberto de Sablé. When was he born? Well, it's not really known, actually. But by the time he died in 1193, he was inferred to have lived a long life, and he died of natural causes. Early in 1190s until his death, he was the Grand Master of the Knights Templar. He fought in many battles, but his first major appearance in the Third Crusade was when he swept in to aid Guy of Lusignan during the Siege of Acre, while serving under King Richard's forces. He also fought very well at Arsuf. Now, there's not a lot known about him before he was Grand Master of the Order, though, which is interesting. Huh? I didn't do anything. God damn it. Well, let's just go away and come right back. Come on. There we go. Now let's handle this guy.
Bring that to your master, then. It contains everything you asked for.
Your assistance in this most delicate of matters is greatly appreciated.
It is my job to keep the peace.
And keep it you will. You'll have no trouble from us.
It's not you and yours that concern me, but the citizens. You picked a strange time to visit our city.
We've simply come to pay our respects.
And stir up trouble for it.
It's not my fault your people can't tell enemy from friend.
Look, you've got what you came for. I think it's best you were on your way.
Time for me to get what I came for too, I guess. Skip past all that wandering, and we're done here.
No, so go away.
Oh, so tempting to kill that guy. Not much more left. We'll be coming up on the Holy Sepulchre in a second here. Now, there was a Grand Master who preceded Roberto de Sablé. His name was Gerard de Riedefort, or de Riedefort. I've heard a lot of pronunciations. And he died during the Siege of Acre. How he died is kind of a toss-up, but the one I side with was that he was captured by Saladin and beheaded. This would have been once Saladin swept into surround Guy's forces, and I'll cover that tactical development. Whoops. I'll cover that development in the next episode, and the little supplemental history things. But anyways, siding with that theory or belief, will say he was beheaded in front of Saladin because he caused trouble, given his role in the Crusader military. And the thing is, though, he was the Grand Master. He was the tip-top guy, and he was off on the battlefield doing the fighting. And the eldest members of the Order, they were very uneasy about having a Grand Master online in the first place. But with Gerard dying, they pretty much got the point where they were at a standstill, and they were uneasy about bringing anyone into the Grand Master status. And at this point, Robert wasn't even a member of the Order. By the time he joined, the elders finally decided they need to elect someone. And for some strange reason that can't be agreed upon, they selected Robert. Now, why did they choose him? I'm not certain. Once again, a lot of details prior to his time as a Grand Master are unknown, and if we assume he was an older knight, perhaps he had developed a bit of a name for himself, or a reputation, and proved his skill and wisdom elsewhere. If that were the case, the Crusaders could have easily looked past the fact that he just joined the Knights Templar. And while I was talking, you might notice the building I was just climbing was a little distinctive. It is actually the Church of the Holy Sepulchre that I was discussing earlier. Well, let's climb up here, unintentionally get a flag, and get a better view. There you can see two domes. I think the one on the left is technically the Edicule, or Edicule. I'm sure someone will jump on my pronunciation of it. But there you go. Got a nice little view of it. Looks pretty nice. Although it feels kind of tacked on. I don't know. But we've got an informant over here, which I haven't had a flag mission in a long time, so I think that's what I'm due for. I'm gonna tackle the shit out of that guy if it's a flag mission. God. It's assassination. Well, I'll probably still knock him around, just on general principle. Let's get a better look of this little side building here. That is possibly the Edicule. Once again, I'm not sure. There's no real way to tell, but that second tower is a little more distinctive given how it looks around the base and the body and what have you. So maybe that's it. Have a present. One last good look. And we gotta get down to the ground floor. Let's see here. Well, scratch that. Hey. Well, here we go. Here we go. Here.
Altair, my savior, you must help me. I was shadowing my prey, a group of Templars, when they saw me. I took flight, and although I evaded them, I twisted my ankle. I'm pathetic, I know. Please, don't tell Malik. I did overhear them say they were leaving town. Find them and kill them. Then I will reward you.
Oh, you twist your ankle. We can't have that. Well, I'll just head on over here, kill these two guys. In 3 minutes? Hot damn. But regardless, twisted his ankle. I'll go pick him up a nice pair of high heels he can wear with his dress. I don't think I thought this through as I should have. Nope. Well, this is off to a great start, don't y'all think? So many ways to skin a fish, but I just missed a ladder back there, I noticed. Oh well. Sort this out easily enough. Thankfully, we have a ton of throwing knives by this point. As you can tell, I've been giving these things away like they're candy. Sharp candies. Now let's handle this other fella. And we're going to have quite a bit of time left over. Good stuff.
He's going to cause trouble.
Oh yes, I am. You have no idea. Now let's handle this the good old-fashioned way. High five. And what I'm just at a second ago, that was the Tower of David. We'll be coming right back, don't worry. Got another viewpoint right by it, and...
I am forever grateful. Malik would never have forgiven me. Here's what I know about the burial of Majd. Reaching Robert might prove difficult, given the number of guards around. You should befriend some scholars to approach him. That shouldn't be a problem for someone of your skill.
That wasn't too bad at all. And they stopped giving me a flag mission. That was fantastic. I'm not going to pick on that guy. He's my favorite informant. That's not saying much, but still. And of course, you can also see there is a gate to the far southwest. At least on the map previously you could see it, and pretty safe by elimination to say that's the Jaffa gate, if they're going off of the real-world structure, which that seems to be the case here because, well, Tower of David's built into a wall, and not too far from it is a gate, so Jaffa. But let's get a better look inside here. It's kind of a shame they do some of these really neat structures and you don't do anything with them. Case in point, look at this. We could have climbed this. What the hell? I mean, seriously, Ubisoft, they kind of just let all this sort of stuff go to waste. Graveyard, that's where we'll be doing our pig sticking of Robert, and we could have climbed this. Why? But you can see the tower as I mentioned before. 1, 2, 3, and there seems to be one further down. I think that's something else. Can't tell because I can't climb it. Yes, I am pissy. I want to climb stuff. Oh well. I can ease the shakes of that just by handling one more little viewpoint that is a extravagant one. Well, at least we can end things with a jump, I guess. And this kind of brings to a nice little close our final bit of exploration. Next time, we'll be taking out our last target. Maybe getting an achievement or two that I don't care about. And then heading along to good old Mr. Rafik, who seems all warm and fuzzy to us for some reason. It's kind of awkward. Where we left off previously, Saladin and King Baldwin agreed to a non-aggression truce. And unfortunately, now that that was handled, and Saladin was at least at bay for now, there was a brief spell of peace which meant that Baldwin had to attend to another matter. There was the matter of his heir. Now, Baldwin V, who was the son of his sister, Sibylla, and William of Montferrat, who was dead by this point, he was only about 3 years old at this time, and King Baldwin knew that by the time he died, the child probably wouldn't even be a teenager. Now, following a huge mess of political shufflings, Baldwin allowed a fella by the name of Guy of Lusignan to marry Sibylla in 1180. Now, the reasoning behind why he chose Guy is kind of uncertain. Some historians say that Baldwin's mother made the call. Others say that Baldwin's mentor, William of Tyre, and the Ibelin clan actually pushed for it in strong opposition to the other choices that were being tossed up. Back to the topic of the non-aggression truce. In spite of this, a certain jerk by the name of Renaud of Chatillon didn't really care one bit. Deciding that non-aggression treaties weren't his thing, he took up a new hobby, one that involved frequent raids on Muslim caravans, along with the occasional ransom and kidnapping. For the next several years, Renaud went just absolutely hog wild, to put it lightly. And primarily he terrorized the Red Sea, which right along its coastline is Mecca, a very, very sacred place in the Islamic faith. His ships terrorized any non-Crusader boats that they came across in the Red Sea, and if a caravaneer happened to traverse by land and they were unlucky enough to come upon Renaud, he would raid them as well and they'd be no safer. Of course, Guy was no angel himself. He made provocations towards the Saracens in this stretch as well, but we'll get back to him in a bit. In order to save face, though, Guy publicly chewed out Renaud in regard to these raids, and he was hoping that Saladin would catch wind of this and think, well, that must have been some guy doing his own thing, he's been chewed out, I don't have to mess with it. He was hoping that Saladin would just see it like that, but unfortunately, his lecturing of Renaud backfired. Renaud turned right around and told Guy that he was lord of his own lands and that Saladin would have no peace from him. Backpedaling a little bit to set up this next part, in 1176, Renaud inherited a city known as Carac through his marriage with Stephanie of Milly. It was his base of operation for most of these raids, and it also put him in an increasingly prime location to launch an attack on Mecca. Distance-wise, it may look rather far away, but it is one of the better cities that give him accessibility to the Red Sea. In 1182, Saladin had enough of Renaud's harassment, and he finally drew the line in the sand. He set his army out from Egypt, hoping to retake the Holy Land once again, and he led a series of battles and skirmishes, many of which King Baldwin personally took part in. The non-aggression treaty by this point was completely broken, largely due to Renaud. It would have broken eventually, but there is no doubt that he instigated this by harassing the Saracens. Most of the conflicts in these series of battles ended largely in a draw. Both sides were temporarily at a stalemate of some sort, but, however, the King of Jerusalem wouldn't be able to keep this up for much longer. By this point, his body had reached its breaking point. The leprosy by now had claimed his eyesight, and he was bedridden. It was now that he turned to Guy and made him interim king in his stead. Saladin, of course, wasn't about to let up on his offensive. Over the next year, he undertook campaigns elsewhere, in Syria and Mesopotamia, acquiring more land and more soldiers. The Saracen forces, as a result, were uniting the regional factions and surrounding the Crusaders geographically. In 1183, once he finished with his campaigns, he returned to the Levant, hoping to address the Renaud of Châtillon issue by laying siege to his headquarters, Carac. This coincided with the royal wedding of Humphrey IV of Touraine and King Baldwin's younger half-sister, Isabella of Jerusalem. This marriage was taking place inside the city walls right at this time when the siege began. If you remember the math, by this point, Isabella is 11. But Humphrey, the groom, is 15 or so it wasn't as creepy as you'd think. You might also be wondering why this fellow was chosen as her husband. Well, Humphrey IV was chosen because in 1179, during a raid at Benias, Humphrey II, who was Humphrey IV's grandfather, personally rushed in to aid Baldwin following a surprise attack by Saladin's nephew. He saved Baldwin's life, but was mortally wounded in the process. Baldwin saw this as his way of paying back the man who saved his life. Plus, their family was regularly picked on by the Ibelin clan, and being married to Isabella would make their bloodline completely untouchable. Now, a number of nobles and vassals, of course, were in attendance at this wedding, including Reynaud of Châtillon, as the Saracens planned, and Guy of Lusignan, as just a coincidence. Of course, given his condition, Baldwin was unable to attend. Where he was staying is unclear, but from what I could gather up, it wasn't too far away. Saladin didn't mind that the king wasn't around. His main objective, at least for now, was to kill Reynaud in revenge for all the trouble he'd caused. In fact, he wasn't even aware that there was a royal wedding in process upon laying his siege. Once he was informed of this through a number of supposed ways, he was actually told the location of the tower where the newlyweds were staying, and he ordered his siege machines not to lay fire on the tower. The only thing that's really debated that I know of with this story is how he found out about where the newlyweds were. But everywhere that I've read, the common thread is that he told them not to attack the tower. This is a nice way of exhibiting the code of honor differences between Reynaud and Saladin. With the siege established in this position, Guy of Lusignan, who's the interim king, was cut off. And the leadership, for all intents and purposes, was frozen as a result. And in spite of his terrible condition at the time, Baldwin caught wind of this and girded himself as best he could, blind and bedridden. He rallied his forces and trekked to Carac. His forces met with Saladin's and managed to break the siege. But unfortunately, the Saracens still lingered even after the siege broke. And given his condition, the king was unable to rule much longer in the field of battle, and he was going to pass command to Guy. And at this point, once again, sources become a bit unclear on what happened next. The general consensus is that Guy was essentially, he refused to fight Saladin. A number of things say that he was actually fearing for his life and wanted to leave Carac so that he wouldn't get killed. As terribly exaggerated as this might sound, given the results of what transpires here, it does make a lot of sense. Now, a little ways after his arrival and the siege breaking, Saladin eventually decided to withdraw. It's kind of debated as to why he did, but the usual conclusion is that he caught wind of reinforcements on the way from Raymond of Tripoli. Guy's reaction and hesitation to enter battle sent Baldwin into a rage. He knew at this time that this man could not rule in his stead in the Holy Land. He immediately, without hesitation, stripped Guy of his post and tried with all of his might to annul the marriage that he held with his sister, Sibylla. The annulments, however, did succeed. The ultimate decision had to be made by Sibylla, and she refused to end the marriage with Guy. If Baldwin were to die on the spot, at this point, Guy would be the heir to the throne. He needed to try something drastic. Now, this drastic solution was born in 1177 and went by the name of Baldwin V. By this point, he was right around 7 years old. Got that in mind, right? Well, that makes him second in line to the throne, right behind his dear old stepdad, Guy. Seeing how unsuited Guy was for the position, he circumvented the possibility of him ruling by directly naming young Baldwin as the co-king, allowing him to basically cut in line right past Guy. In 1185, within the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, Baldwin IV crowned his nephew as king. Not too long thereafter, Baldwin finally passed away from his leprosy, leaving the now 8-year-old nephew with the crown. Unfortunately, Baldwin V was just as unlucky as his dear old uncle. Not only was he a political pawn from the day that he popped out in the world, but he was also frequently ill, and he ended up dying almost a year after he was named king. he was entombed along with his uncle within the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. In spite of all that he could do to keep him from gaining the crown, Guy of Lusignan was now king of Jerusalem.